Hello and good day. This is Raju Bhatt with Global Mediation Team. I am here and I want to thank the sponsors of this program for putting this on. AI for Peace. This is a very important topic at this time. Thank you, Eugene. Thank you, Branka, for your assistance. And I just want to say that we have a very distinguished guest here today, Danish Masood Alavi. He is from the United Nations Office of Technology Labs. I'm just going to give you a little introduction. Within the United Nations Innovation Technology Lab, the use of virtual reality extends beyond some of its technical capabilities, encompassing the power of empathy as a critical tool. By immersing individuals in VR simulations, the UN aims to foster a profound sense of empathy towards the issues it seeks to address. This empathetic approach allows decision makers, advocates, and the public to step into the shoes of those directly affected by global challenges. It goes beyond mere information and statistics. You can actually have a visceral, emotional connection to the issues that are going on. The incorporation of empathy as a tool within the UN's VR initiatives is a particular potent in building understanding and support for humanitarian causes. For instance, through VR experiences, individuals can visit refugee camps. You can visit the consequences of natural disasters or understand the struggles of marginalized communities. This immersive empathy building not only informs, but also inspires action. That's the key, that we want to inspire action, encouraging people to become more engaged in efforts to address these issues. It helps bridge between the gap between distant problems and the personal, making global challenges feeling closer to home. And this is why the United Nations is using virtual reality. The use of empathy within the UN applications is a testament to the organization's commitment to human-centered approaches in addressing complex global problems. It underscores the idea that fostering compassion and a shared sense of responsibility is essential in creating a better, more interconnected world. By leveraging the powerful power of emotional power of virtual reality, the UN harnesses a valuable tool to drive positive change and promote global unity. And so we have a wonderful guest here today, Danish Masood Alavi, who is with the UN Innovation Technology Lab. UNITAL is a very small group of people. They have formed maybe just in the last 4 years. And so they've been doing some amazing things. And Danish, I wanted to introduce you and come on in, and you can take over from here for a little while.
Great, Raju. Thank you so much, friends. My name is Danish Masood Alavi. I'm actually I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I'm not speaking on behalf of the United Nations, and indeed I am with the UN Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, and there I co-lead the innovation unit, whose job it is to essentially look at emerging technologies and repurpose them for peacemaking and peace-building use cases in a way that's co-creative and collaborative with our colleagues on the ground in conflict contexts. I think we have a fairly tiny room here with just 11 of you, if I'm counting correctly. So, feel no pressure whatsoever, but feel free to turn on your cameras if you like, and feel free to jump in at any point. This is, if we were in physical space, I would have asked us to sit in a circle together and really just had a conversation with each other, given that there's so few of us, which for me really is a luxury in this moment. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen and give you guys a sense of some of the things that we've been up to. Here we go. Okay. Can you guys see my screen okay? Great. And again, friends, feel free to turn on your cameras and to jump in at any point should you have any questions. So as I was saying, within the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, the innovation team or innovation unit looks at emerging technologies and finds ways to repurpose them in a way that's useful for us, right? So some of the technologies that we've looked at, aside from spatial computing and sort of virtual and augmented reality or mixed reality, or if you like, or extended reality, if you like, XR. Aside from those include natural language processing and artificial intelligence. Also, we've looked at space-based sensors, so satellite-based sensors that are getting all kinds of readings and collecting data about our planet, and using that to better understand some of the ways in which the multidimensional climate change and climate collapse and water diminishment impact peace and security. For those of you, and I doubt that there's anyone here who doesn't know what the PPA is, the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs is part of the UN Secretariat, and its job is to serve the UN Secretary General as part of his good offices, to help implement UN Security Council mandates, particularly as they pertain to special political missions, and to analyze and where possible, develop processes for dialogue, mediation, negotiation between conflict actors, often under mandates from the UN Security Council. So today we'll be talking about how we're using virtual reality, and let's dive right in. As you know, I mean, this is fairly obvious and fairly straightforward stuff. It's when it comes to peace and security, it links quite directly to the precise reason that the United Nations came about. Now, as I said earlier, in the innovation cell inside the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, we're looking at future trends and identifying avenues for applying emerging technologies to better support these practices and interventions. When it comes to conflict mediation in particular, we find that VR is an extremely useful tool. Here we go. Now, what are some of the uses that we've come up with? So Raju was alluding to this earlier. So one of the things that we found, in the course of our work, we're routinely, for those of you that are familiar with the UN or UNers yourself, you know well that we're called upon to routinely provide briefings to the Security Council in the form of written reports that are either quarterly, sometimes every 2 quarters, sometimes annually. And when we provide those reports, they're often, of course, we do our best to make sure that we're comprehensive, but it doesn't really give our sort of permanent reps that sit on the Security Council an immersive and objective sense, a tangible sense for what it's like to be on the ground in conflict zones. And because that was the case, and because the Security Council is often unable to travel to conflict contexts because of cost or logistics, or during the pandemic, or security reasons, for example, the council most certainly cannot at present go to an active conflict zone like Gaza, right? So given those circumstances, how do we give them an objective sense? And we realized that one of the ways we could do this is by using sort of immersive media like virtual reality to basically give them a more immersive sense of what it's like to be in a conflict context, and thereby reducing the distance between them and what they're deliberating on. And here we began to really think of this not as a replacement for the written reports, which I think are extremely important, but as a supplementary form of briefing material. So, in that vein, we decided to essentially, in the actual Security Council chamber, for the first time in the history of the United Nations, for formal briefings, use virtual reality occasionally. The very first instance where we did this was in a session on the situation in Colombia. Thereafter, we also used it for Yemen and a number of other sort of issues that the council remains seized of. Now, this is I mean, less and less so, given how it's slowly becoming popular, but it is something of still emerging medium, I would say, virtual reality. And it's interesting to kind of begin to think about how do we set guardrails around this kind of technology. The use case that I described earlier with the Security Council is a particularly interesting one. If for no other reason, then we have to produce media, immersive media, and engage in a form of immersive storytelling that is objective to a fault, because it can't be, it can't appear as emotive, particularly given the kind of polarization we sometimes see within the council, with the international peace and security architecture evolving in the ways that it has over the last few years, in particular, the last couple of years, if you will, in particular. But so those are, I mean, essentially, as we've gone along, we've had to work with experts, work with filmmakers, et cetera, to ensure that things are produced up to that standard. Now, that is not the only use case. The other use case that's important to us is one about storytelling. And here, the reality is that the UN, and I know that I'm talking to a small room of some people who are at the UN and others that are very familiar with it, routinely produces reports year-round. Those reports cost a lot of money and a lot of time in terms of person hours. And if we're honest, they're read by very few people. Now, not every report that is produced, but some reports are something that would be of interest to a much broader public audience. One such report that we think is deeply important is sorry, let me just jump to that slide really quick. Sorry, one of the slides has gotten moved. Excuse me for just one quick second. Where is my, yes, here we go. And I'll jump back. So one such report is the report that was that came through a General Assembly resolution that was sponsored by South Africa, and it was in honor of Nelson Mandela's legacy, called the Secretary General's Report on the State of Global Peace and Security. And this report featured several important points having to do with income inequality across regions, across genders in particular. It talked about spending on arms and weapons versus spending on sort of development. And it also talked about loss of biodiversity and sea level rise as issues that really stand to undermine global peace and security. Now, the reality is that once that report was looked at and published, it was likely going to sit, on a shelf and gather dust. So what we decided to do is to create an immersive experience out of it and tell the story of it, and to tell it in a way that was somewhat subversive, in the sense that in the story, what happens is that a prime minister is about to give a speech at the UN General Assembly, and the General Assembly kind of gets hacked by a group of high school students who then challenge the prime minister because he's someone who denies all these things about income inequality, about sort of spending on weapons and loss of biodiversity and sea level rise. And so this is an immersive sort of virtual reality film or experience, if you like, that I directed. And we were very lucky in that it got picked up as part of the official selection for at the Sundance Film Festival in 2022. So this is just an example of how using these types of environments and these types of technologies really can give our ideas and our reporting legs in a way that just printed matter or material cannot. Now, that's not the only use case, of course. The other use case that's super interesting to us is one of beginning to use sort of virtual reality environments as a place to convene. As all of you know, one of the many sort of if the virtue of the UN, if little else, at minimum, is that it's a place to convene, and a very important one at that, particularly at times of high tension. Now, the reality here is that in the actual practice of conflict mediation, negotiation, dialogue, process design, etc., as some of you, I'm sure, know already, that it isn't always possible to get the parties to convene physically because things are too polarized, or travel is impossible, or there are various logistical factors that complicate things. In such instances, you have, of course, many alternate formats such as proximity talks, et cetera, or back channel talks. But we recognize that an immersive environment, so a version of the United Nations, let's say in the metaverse, would be something that would be of value. So we essentially created that. We created that kind of environment. And the pictures you're seeing here are actual pictures from that environment. And they allow people to who are thousands and thousands of miles away to actually meet in VR and have a conversation with each other as fully embodied avatars that are photorealistic and based on their actual faces. Here, our goal is also to use this environment to, of course, bridge participation gaps, because we find that we tend to have a high degree of focus on high-level negotiations, and the people who constitute the delegations in such high-level negotiations are often not representatives, not broadly representative of the societies that they're speaking on behalf of. Certainly, when it comes to minority voices, people of different genders, etc. And again, this has the possibility of making it easier for some of those gaps to be bridged. This is another image of the environment that we've built. Now, our goal here is also to kind of use it as a test bed to advance sort of different approaches. One is, we combine it with sort of different tools from natural language processing, which you can think of as the intersection of computation and linguistics, where, for example, in our environment, if you are a delegate who speaks in Japanese, you can speak in Japanese, and the other person will hear your words in Arabic or in any of the 6 UN languages or other languages, which makes it much easier to bridge any kind of gaps that there might be, and also obviates the need for simultaneous interpretation. In addition to that, our idea here is to work with groups of neuroscientists, again, using that immersive environment as a test bed in order to better understand how sort of intergroup neuroscience experiments that have demonstrated strong results in eliciting groups that are polarized to show pro-social behaviors. And here, when those experiments in lab settings show good evidence, they can then be translated into experiences or rooms that allow participants to engage in experiences in virtual reality, again, with a view to eliciting pro-social behaviors. And in this case, of course, since this is more experimental, this is not something that we would expose to actual delegates involved in a negotiation, though as we collect more evidence in partnership with some of our academic and research partners, that we may indeed come to a point where we have a high degree of confidence such that we can integrate them into the main version of the platform. The other thing that's interesting about this environment that I'm showing you is that it can also be used as a tool for training on mediation and negotiation. So in the latest version of the environment, for example, we've integrated a non-playing character, so a computer avatar, if you will, into the environment. And that character is actually connected to an AI model, to a large language model. It's connected to GPT-4. And it's connected to a version of GPT-4 that, through first-order prompting and fine-tuning, is more focused on diplomacy and negotiation. So you can actually use that character to spar if you're looking to practice. If you're a mediator and you're about to go into a mediation exercise, you can actually practice with this non-playing character who's an AI, or you can actually ask them about different important historical questions. So, for example, I tested it and I said, give me 4 examples where confidence building measures between Israelis and Palestinians were successful in the last 50 years. And the character immediately recited 4 examples. And I said, do you think that some of those methods might be applicable in the current context? And then the character started explaining why they thought that was the case. So that's another reason why this type of environment can be useful for this type of experimentation. Of course, we've also worked with some artists and designers to make sure that the clothes that one can choose from are representative of different communities, and also a little bit futuristic as well, as you can see, which is a nice fun thing. Our work, as we've said before, draws on expert research in partnership with neuroscientists, behavioral psychologists, creatives, production companies, conflict mediation programs, and more. On the latter part, the conflict mediation programs, because we want to be able to test out some of the approaches that are more experimental with students, graduate students in conflict mediation programs. For example, ETH's program in peace mediation. And here it's useful because that allows us to gather data in an ethical way, with the whole process of going to an ethics board, presenting the experiment, getting the approval, getting the consent of the students, and getting them to actually participate in a sort of simulated mediation exercise. Let me pause there, actually, and turn back to our tiny room for more questions. I will say that depending on your interest and the questions we get, I'm also happy to share a little more on some of the scientific basis for this type of work. So why are we using virtual reality for peace negotiations? Because we have good reason to believe, from years and years of research on the use of virtual reality in different sort of experiments involving in-group, out-group dynamics, and among others, that these types of interventions can elicit pro-social behaviors. But I'm going to reserve sharing more on that and showing you some slides, based on your questions. So I'll pause there. Over to you, Raju.
Danish, thank you. Thank you, Danish, for that amazing presentation. And I am opening it up for questions. And looks like we've got actually, I've got a question I can start with, Danish, for you. How is virtual reality being used for peacekeeping, with peacekeeping purposes?
I'd be happy to answer that, Raju. I think Frederica also has her hand up.
Okay.
Maybe we can take both questions. Yeah.
Perfect. Frederica, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. And apologies if the camera goes at some point, it's a bit flicking. I have actually two questions. I mean, super interesting, super fascinating stuff. One question is, to what extent do you see these VR meetings as replacing or complementing face-to-face and written material? So how do you see the overall balance? I mean, what is the ideal balance that you would like to see, and what role that do these VR meetings have therein? And the second one is, which is connected to whom are you talking? Meaning that, it seems that part of this is addressed to diplomats and part to the wider audience. And so I'm curious to see, who's your target, when and why, and if you can expand on why you're doing this, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. I'll start in reverse order. So from the most recent question and then backwards in time. So why are we doing this? I think that I need to look up his name, but there's a philosopher of software who's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he would often talk about how what software is at the end of the day is a set of practices belonging to a particular community that's baked into code. Right, a set of community practices that's encoded into computer language, or language that a computer can interpret and perform functions through. And I find that to be an extremely important epistemic point, in that the kinds of technologies that are available that we often use off the shelf are created by others, and often people and groups of people and companies that operate in a world that is different from our own, in the sense that they have a different worldview and a different sort of epistemic framework that they're operating through, in a different set of optimizations. Now, this is not to make as such, I'm not being philosophical for no reason. I'm saying this because we, as people who operate in the peace and security community, in the community of peace builders, peacemakers, or peacekeeping, need to begin to not be afraid to take technology and build it ground up, bottom up, and repurpose or code it in a way that the set of practices that are important to our community are encoded into the software. And that was kind of the sort of that was the sort of philosophical approach that undergirded this effort of looking at virtual reality, seeing how it could be used, and recognizing that there is a way to do this. And there's a science here as well, in terms of a long record of evidence in lab settings, and some that have been ecologically validated in field settings, of applying virtual reality-based interventions. that's kind of where the why, or where it comes from. In terms of who do we expect to use it, and do we expect it to replace meetings? So I don't think it can ever replace face-to-face meetings, right? I just literally got off a plane 3 hours ago after running a long mediation process right now that I was facilitating, involving technology and geopolitics, with some of the, some of the actors that are in that space. And I don't think that I can tell you, at least from my experience of doing this kind of work, that nothing can replace face-to-face, in-person meetings that are embodied, where there's a whole somatic experience of facing each other and being able to shake hands and talk to each other, and even break bread together. However, I think that this can be used as a tool that creates a pathway that leads to that kind of in-person interaction, wherein that jumping to that in-person interaction might be a little bit difficult. And a similar justification could be used for something as simple as proximity talks, which are commonly used, right? So where the mediator travels between the delegations because the delegations are unwilling to face each other or talk to each other in the same room. So that's kind of where this comes from. And then the environment is also a test bed, like I said several times during the presentation, because it allows us to talk to neuroscientists and run experiments inside the environment. It allows us to train mediators. It also allows us to look at generative AI and repurpose it for our use cases. We have a non-playing character who appears as an avatar that you can talk to, when you don't have a colleague necessarily who can help you with that, right? Or it feels embarrassing, or you want to try privately, or you want to ask questions, So it's extremely useful. And of course, as the United Nations ourselves, we're all over the place. We're in conflict contexts. We're running special political missions and sort of field offices, country teams, what have you. And having a place that is our own, where we can convene and meet each other and have an embodied experience of seeing each other with spatial audio, by the way. In other words, if I walk up to you in the environment and I whisper in your ear, it feels like I'm whispering in your ear, versus if I were in the other corner of the room in the virtual environment, you wouldn't be able to hear me. So we have spatial audio as well, which is an important effect. Who are we building this for? We're building this for diplomats. We're building this for scientists, neuroscientists, and researchers. We're building it for other academic partners. We're building it for students that are studying peace mediation. We're building it, of course, for actual parties that are involved in mediation and dialogue processes. That's it. To Raju's question, I've reserved that for the end because it's, I think, more straightforward. I think the Department of Peace Operations, which oversees peacekeeping sort of initiatives and peacekeepers, et cetera, has used virtual reality in some similar ways, having to do with kind of briefing material that's supplementary in terms of creating sort of immersive, objective sort of reports that allow decision makers to understand what the situation on the ground is. And I think they've also been exploring the use of virtual reality, last I heard, and engaged with them on the issue as a sort of environment for training. This is what I know.
Thank you, Danish, very much. Anybody else would like to ask a question? Danish, you brought up the word ethical considerations in your talk. And I've been listening to a little bit about Thomas Zubo's work with trauma and collective trauma. They've been trying to work with different areas in the collective trauma field and ancestral trauma. One of the things he says is that because we fail to respond ethically in the moment, that we have these ethical frozen places, these ethical frozen, he calls it basically it's frozen responses. I'm wondering, can virtual reality help with those frozen responses so we can move forward with some of these intractable conflicts that have been going on for 75 years?
Let me show you guys something really quick here. See if I can pull it up. And this speaks a little bit to some of the other work I have done. And I enjoy answering questions that like such a thoughtful question with sort of an example. I find that to be extremely useful. So this is an example of work that I did while at MIT with my collective Be Another lab, where we were exploiting this neuroscience research technique called the body transfer illusion. For example, I can ask, why does Raj Kumar's brain believe that it's in Raj Kumar's body? And it has to do with how your brain is integrating information that's coming in from all your senses. We tend to say we have 5 senses, we have more than 20 in truth. And your brain integrates information that's coming in from every direction and gives you the immersive experience of owning your body. But because we understand how that process works, we can exploit that process to give you the immersive experience of seeing yourself in another person's body from a first-person perspective. So you open your eyes, you're in a body different from your own, you sometimes will use that environment to tell you a story about from that person's perspective, whose body you're seeing yourself in. The images you're seeing are explain how the setup works a little bit, and in the bottom right, you're seeing examples of it being applied in Israel, actually, at an asylum, a center that basically detains asylum seekers in Israel, where Israeli citizens were getting to swap bodies. We were running experiments with them, with people that were seeking asylum. Now, the reason I bring this up is because in doing this, I was doing this in 2 contexts. One context was applying it in this type of community-based setting to do basically community level peace building work, if you like. The other sort of application for me was in a scientific setting where I was collaborating with researchers and intergroup neuroscientists to see how it shifted behaviors, how it worked as an intervention, whether it was efficacious as an intervention in order to elicit pro-social behaviors or shifts in attitude that last toward an otherwise perceived outgroup. But in doing this work, what I realized is that for the person who's telling their story, i.e. the performer on the bottom right, because sometimes they'd be telling their story with audio, and while the other person, the user, is seeing themselves in their body, what would happen is that it would give them an opening or an opportunity to generously offer a story that was sometimes difficult and revisit it while having someone in the state of completely seeing themselves in their body, right, in the performer's body. And that created a kind of fluidity, or I noticed often that it unfroze something within them, because they'd often be talking about difficult stories, and of course we do this in a way where we'd have psychosocial support present and a whole protocol around it, because it can be triggering and it's difficult work. But there was something about even as the performer and the storyteller of exposing oneself multiple times to that story and retelling it and having the experience of having someone understand. So in this particular setup, what happens is the other person sees themselves in your body as you're telling your story, and then at the end of it, we have both people walk toward each other and they embrace each other, and they take off their headsets and they realize that the story was being performed live. Because the user, when they first enter the experience, is not aware that the performer is performing the story live. But that kind of whole interaction of having someone listen to your story as in a one-on-one performance and then want to talk to you about it really unfroze something. And the reason, sorry, that was a long explanation, but the reason I shared all of that is because I started doing that work more than 10 years ago, but it's one of the things that really personally convinced me that there is a lot that one can do with this technology in terms of shifting things in a powerful way.
Thank you for that explanation. That was great. And the visuals was really helpful there. Anybody else would like to ask a question at this time? Let's see. Go ahead, Frederic. You can go ahead and ask that again. Feel free to ask.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't want to kind of
No.
monopolize the Q&A, and I hope that other people come in. I'm just wondering what kind of conditions help to make sure that the emotive response that you are eliciting can be, worked with in a positive manner. Because in a way, the technology, yes, unfreezes emotions, and I see that this is a powerful story, but what it unfreezes, it's also a medium, a mediated process. And so potentially, it can also exacerbate or lead, in directions that might not be fully sort of. I mean, how do you choose the story to be unfrozen? Because there are a zillion stories out there. The UN is doing loads of stuff. So I wonder at the micro level and at the macro level, how do you manage?
So just a few points of clarification. One is that I'm speaking on behalf of myself here and not on behalf of the UN. And the work that I showed you was not work that I did with the UN. It was work that I was doing individually with researchers while at MIT. I think I think people that do co-counseling say if you're going to open a wound, you better be carrying the bomb, right? And I think retelling stories, depending on the situation, can be extremely triggering for the person telling the story, and has to be done in a deeply responsible way. In the case of the example that I showed, there were people on hand available who are trained professionals to provide psychosocial support. In addition to that, the kind of protocol we'd established of making art with refugees and asylum seekers was rather strict. At the very outset, we made clear that whatever we were creating wasn't owned by us as such, that it was co-owned, because they were part owners of the performance, right? And whether or not they wanted to proceed was something that only they could decide ultimately. It wasn't something that it wasn't for us to decide. Of course, we would talk about the risk of not only the risk that you talked about, but also the risk of empathic distress also for the user, right? That is also a very real risk. So we'd have to have all those conversations and have like a whole sort of almost like a pedagogical sort of campaign, attempt at explaining all these things over several days before agreeing to creatively build a performance of this type with support at hand in case people felt they needed to talk to someone. And regardless of whether someone expressed the need to talk to someone, they would get a short session after the performance of talking to someone who's essentially a therapist. That was the only way that it was sort of okay. And now, granted, we weren't doing this as as sort of like a scientific experiment. In these cases, we were doing it in a peace building context with community organizations and recognizing that it was a sort of a storytelling performance that involved technology.
Thank you, Danish. Frederica? We have a few more minutes for maybe one or two more questions. Danish, I wanted to ask you just a question that's kind of out there. After listening to Thomas Ubel, he was talking about how to create AI, because this is a conference, AI for Peace. How to create AI that's that mirrors our nervous system, because our nervous system is what is either co-regulated or unregulated, and whether our nervous system is able, whether we're able to respond through ethical conditions or not, it's the co-regulated nervous systems that can actually do that. So would you like to say a few words about that? How do you feel that the virtual reality mirrors our nervous system more than the whole AI system as a whole?
Raju, I don't fully understand the question. You're
Okay.
saying you're asking how we create a simulated version of our nervous system in virtual reality? Is that what you're asking?
Well, the topic was about, can AI heal us? Can artificial intelligence heal us? And it seems like that's a big task for AI to heal us. But it seems like virtual reality could take a little slice of that and help us move towards that, because it reflects more our ability to be in a confined, regulated nervous system, confined space, and being able to integrate that experience in a way.
Right. On that question, on can AI heal us? I think that large language models, I suspect, cannot. I'd be surprised. Can they potentially be fine-tuned in a way to behave a little bit like a therapist, at least for initial intake? Possibly, though I haven't seen anyone do that, probably because of the liability issues there and the absence of strong evidence, and to do that ethically would require for there to be strong scientific evidence that speaks to its efficaciousness. So I don't know about that part. In terms of virtual reality, what I can say is that there are a lot of treatment interventions that have for years been shown to be effective, that can easily be parlayed into an immersive environment. So somatic sensing, EMDR, different types of dance therapy, all those things I think can be parlayed into an immersive environment and potentially be used. When, of course, they have a strong base of evidence to support them as treatment protocols or interventions that can be done in a relatively easygoing way by those who are trying to self-soothe, for example. or entertain themselves, but somehow in the process, work through some of the difficult feelings they might be having. That I think is possible. But I don't know that AI can do that yet. Certainly not AI that I have seen up to now in terms of large language models.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Just to follow up to that question, does there's a question about AI, because AI is learning. This is a quote that I picked up from Thomas Hubel also. AI learns from a system that is not aware of that which is not aware of. That is not
Yeah.
an issue in virtual reality, right? You're not
Mm.
programming something that you're not aware of.
Well, I mean, you see, I think it's important to recognize that it's not an apples to apples comparison between, AI is something that's very different, and AI is, by the way, intelligence here. It's important also and I'm stepping outside the scope of our conversation here, and forgive me for doing so, but intelligence is separate from synthetic consciousness. Synthetic consciousness is its own thing, but intelligence does not imply consciousness, right? I think we would sooner arrive at synthetic consciousness through bioengineering and organoids, which is actually somewhat troubling, than we will through artificial intelligence, in as much as I understand it, and I work in the field. So, but don't think of myself as an authority, but I have some exposure to the field because I work in it. But so that's one thing. Second is that I don't think that you can have AI tools that are available to you in an immersive environment. I think that the way to think about VR is a type of technology that allows you to locate yourself in space, where you are in space in relation to other objects. That's and using that calculation, let's say in the back, it can help create an immersive environment using these graphics, etc. Right? But that's completely separate from, in the same way that it wouldn't make sense to, I'm exaggerating here for effect, but in the same way that it wouldn't make sense to compare a flat screen TV and the technology behind it to AI, but of course AI could inform some of the software that you see being used to program the television or the flat screen or whatever.
Thank you for that. Well, we got a few more minutes, but I really appreciate your presentation. It was wonderful, and looking forward to what you guys are doing next down the road. Do you have anything you can share with us? Any of your future projects that are on the whiteboard?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that's interesting for me is integrating a large language model in the immersive environment, and then making sure that it's fine-tuned according to the needs of what a UN sort of peace mediator would need to train themselves or to prepare themselves ahead of running a negotiation process. I think that's rather cutting edge, and to do that using non-playing characters in an immersive environment, that's actually very interesting. I was hoping to make a video for you guys using my headset here in time, but I didn't get a chance to. But I think that I think is the cutting edge, and is only being and Meta itself is only Meta, Facebook, the owners of the company that makes these Oculus headsets, has only started experimenting with themselves very recently. So I feel that we're doing some interesting work there. But again, in all of this, the most important thing and my challenge to my fellow humans here, in the peace and security community is, what practices do we want to encode in software that we build ourselves, right? And what optimizations do we want to encode in that software or technology? And I think that that's going to be very important moving forward, because the platforms we use are not neutral. They're not values neutral, right? So I think we need to, get our hands dirty and actually build things ourselves.
Thank you, Dennis. Those are very valid points. And it all goes back to what you talked about earlier about our ethical and our values, and considering those. Well, thank you everyone for being here. We are at the end of this program, virtual reality and for good at the United Nations. We'll see what goes on. Please jump in, and there's a lot online. There's also something on UN 2.0 that is available online. Check it out, because there's plenty of tools. They call them tools. They call them tools in the toolkit. And you want to look at that toolkit because there's a lot of things in there. Thank you. Good day.